You know, I really thought I was going to enjoy this show, and then this happened within the first 10 minutes. Hello guys, Yami Yusaku here, and welcome to my first Yugioh VRains review. Now, I know I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball on this one, with the first episode having come back in early May, but my schedule was a total mess for a while, so here I am starting to catch myself up. I plan to spitfire out the first 5 episode reviews so then I can start doing weekly ones like everybody else. But boy, oh boy, this first episode was fantastic. I mean, this is our 6th Yu-Gi-Oh series, and now we're just starting to get one that will introduce the central conflict within the first episode, or at least that's how it appears. That's pretty awesome if you ask me. And if we take a minute to look at the core of how they managed to do that so well, it's because they weren't super focused on dueling in this first episode, and I'm very okay with that. I think a lot of people who really enjoy the anime that I've seen do analysis don't mind these non-dueling episodes, as long as they take them to put some serious focus into the characters, which I think they did extraordinarily well. I mean, the Yusaku and Ignis dialogue is already more entertaining than the dialogue between any two characters we've seen in probably the first 10 episodes of any of these shows thus far, in terms of it just being amusing how kind of snarky and sarcastic they are towards one another. I think it's beautiful to watch. And given Yusaku says something along the lines of, "I can sense its presence" about the AI to Kusanagi in this episode, part of me is wondering if part of that forgotten history connects these two somehow, and maybe that's why they interact so easily with each other, so spitbally with their jokes and that type of thing. I don't know, we'll just have to see, and that's a really loose theory, nothing solid there. But moving more generally into the review as a whole, much like several other people have already commented, VRains definitely gives me a 5Ds vibe. I mean, where we had Signer Dragons for 5Ds, we've already got these strangely colored bird things, which, I mean, they totally remind me of Signer Dragons. And towards the end of the opening of the show, you even see a color kind of associated with Revolver, Blue Angel, Go, and Yusaku already. So I think it's kind of implied that they're each going to be connected to one of these birds in some way, whatever they happen to symbolize. Maybe that's totally ludicrous, and it'll come to only just be that the birds are just this loose symbol of what the main characters are, but I have a feeling it's going to identify with their main monsters and a major plot element and those types of things, which is pretty awesome. Additionally, Yusaku's total appearance of confidence thus far definitely gives me kind of a Yusei vibe if he was a little bit more hard-edged and less friendship-focused. He's very strong at dueling, at least he's applied to be by having already beaten the Knights of Hanoi, which seem to have this super dark reputation to them as being powerful and difficult to overcome. He's a hacker who's good at what he does, and Yusei was really good at working on the D-wheels and those types of things. He seems to have already picked up how to ride on the D-board. I think they might be called D-boards, I'm not entirely sure yet, whatever you ride on the speed duels, and Yusei was great at maneuvering on a D-wheel, so I'm getting a lot of connections there, and while Yusei wasn't the greatest protagonist necessarily in my mind, it's hard not to like the guy, and I think he does serve as a good role model for people. I'm hoping Yusaku comes to do the same, and Yusaku's complete kind of disregard for all the additional attention, heck, even avoiding it intentionally, definitely reminds me of Yusei. I mean, Yusei, whenever people would compliment him, he would just kind of nod his head or kind of push it off to the side. He didn't necessarily want the recognition, he just wanted to do the right thing. Now, Yusaku's motives seem to be coming off a little bit more negative, based off the pre-information we got and those types of things about him wanting to reclaim his past from the Knights of Hanoi. It's almost a vengeful type of thing. Although they are evil hackers, so you could definitely make a case that it is also very good. It's hard to judge at this point, we don't know a ton yet. But anyway, either way, Yusaku's definitely giving me a vibe of Yusei, just like the show as a whole is giving me a vibe of 5Ds, and there's definitely that darker atmosphere too. Just look at the color schemes, there's a lot more grays and blacks and shroudiness to it than we saw in either Arc 5 or Zexal by far, and there's definitely much less of an Agal focus, which, I mean, I'm okay with that. I didn't mind it, but it's nice to see them changing back for a bit just to keep it fresh. The scene that we see with Bishop talking to Akira Zaizen also strongly reminds me of when characters used to speak to Zone, especially when we saw Sherry LeBlanc speaking to him a few times in that last arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. Maybe it's just because, you know, there's this giant floating thing that almost sort of like a person within something that's giant speaking to other people, and like the little carved almost like eye-ish type of piece in the Bishop piece reminds me a little bit of the opening in Zone's Mask. So, yet again, it's just that these subtle things that are adding up to a lot of 5Ds connections in my mind. There's a lot of darkness in this episode in terms of what's already happened, too. When we saw Topologic Bomber Dragon going in and attacking everybody, we really don't know. That might kill them, depending on what's been done with these types of shows before. Sometimes once your body's in that program, you are at risk to whatever happens to you in that program. It's hard to judge based off episode 1, but there's a chance these people might actually be dying. I mean, after all, Bishop did seem fairly concerned, whereas Akira didn't seem concerned at all. I mean, Bishop wasn't super concerned, but it was something at least. It shows that there's some risk, and, you know, when business executives like that are concerned about those types of things, a lot of it's because it's risks to their customers, and who are the customers in VRains? The people logging into it. So, yeah. And as for the last major thing I currently see connecting this show to 5Ds, it's one thing I really hope that they get right, that 5Ds ended up just needing to adapt because of some criticism they were getting, and that's this 3-faction system they have going on. They've got the Knights of Hanoi, Soul Tech, and Yusaku's mini group he's got with Kusanagi right now, but I have a feeling that will expand. 5Ds had a similar function going on. You had Signers, Dark Signers, and then you had Arcadia Movement. Arcadia Movement ended up fading out, but it was a really interesting concept, and I think they could have something awesome going on between Soul Tech, Knights, and Yusaku's group, especially if they don't all end up taking the same side, or if they're temporarily on the same side. Zexal sort of did this almost when Shark and Yuma teamed up again to deal with Don 1000, and that type of thing. You had 3 factions going on. It's just a good idea, and I hope they get it right, as opposed to 5Ds where it ended up collapsing for whatever reason. Now, moving on from that and the 5Ds connection, because I don't want to spend the entire video talking about that, and I don't want to ramble too long. I've already talked about Yusaku a little bit and how I'm enjoying him as a character. I just hope his character development isn't super flat after the first season, which I kind of felt like Yusei's was, hence why a lot of people call him a Mary Sue. I'm enjoying a lot of the other characters, but we'll talk about them each a little bit more specifically. Beginning with Kusanagi, I like him a lot. I think he's got a little bit of a slight not sarcasm, lightheartedness that Yusaku seems to lack towards the subject matter. He's a little bit more at ease while still maintaining a seriousness that, like, his concern about the hot dog stand is a good example, when Yusaku pulling him aside from the major business and that type of thing to be like, hey, we gotta set this trap so we can capture Ignis and do all that stuff and be able to pull out Hanoi. My biggest concern for him at this point is I don't want to see him end up like Tetsuo or Bronk. I hope I got his sub-name right, from Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, where we barely see him do it all, because right now he hasn't really said anything about his deck or anything. Hopefully, we'll see. I mean, most of the time in Yu-Gi-Oh! Main characters end up dueling, and I'd really like to see him end up dueling, because it seems like characters that don't end up dueling just turn into cheerleaders or unimportant to the plot, unfortunately. So, we'll see what happens there. Blue Angel, my biggest concern for her right now is she was already saved once by Yusaku, and we've seen her sort of dueling off to the side, but I fear that damsel in distress kind of thing that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a bad habit of creating. Go, and I'm not really sure what to think of Go yet. I mean, we've barely seen anything of him. He seems very smiley and bright, and supposedly is a really friendly guy from the descriptions that we received in pre-release, so I'm excited to see where he goes with him. Akira Zaizan, he's definitely coming off as a little bit intimidating because he seems to put business above all else. Yet again, Bishop seemed to express more concern for the people of VRains than Akira did, which isn't necessarily a good sign for his character being good at all. I mean, I don't trust Bishop one bit either, but the lack of concern for his own customers' safety, as long as it's for the quote-unquote greater good, is a little bit concerning. Another thing that sort of connects to Zone 2, this idea of sacrificing some for the greater good. Revolver, thus far, I would say, is very intimidating. I mean, he seems to have that little bit of suspense already built up about him that a lot of villains do, because he's hiding in his own lair, he's sending his minions to do his dirty work, and it's not exactly clear what his intentions are, which I think definitely adds to the amount that you could possibly fear him, considering they are at least portraying him for now as being an antagonist. I have a feeling based off that bird swirl of each of the characters into the color thing, and him having a bird associated with him, one of the 6, that he's probably going to end up being a good guy, but it's a question of how long he's going to take to be redeemed and what he's going to do before he's redeemed, how creepy he turns out to be for this first arc, or not even creepy so much as intimidating. Then we move on to Ignis, who I think is excellent comic relief thus far. He definitely seems like he's going to be sort of an astral type in the way that he combats with the person who he's with. He and Yusaku are already getting into a lot of debates about things. I mean, it's the first episode and he's already told Yusaku, yeah, this guy's got a really powerful dragon. I don't think your deck's good enough to handle him. And he's just straight and blunt about it. If I were Yusaku, I'd be a little bit concerned about Ignis. There's clearly a reason that all these other places have had so much trouble catching him. I would fear him finding a way to escape on his own. He's already expressed a level of independent thought Yusaku seemed to not think capable of an AI, given how he was expressing them not being able to show emotions and have quite as much free will. Yet Ignis seems to be the polar opposite, having been the one to summon the data storm in this episode, that after criticizing Yusaku's deck, running with that, the data storm I have a feeling is going to be something that gifts Yusaku monsters or something like that, some kind of card, some kind of aid or something, because within the context of the episode, Ignis calls upon it by going to those spirits we see in the beginning, right after he's criticizing Yusaku's deck as not being good enough. So that would be implying that Ignis is calling some sort of reinforcements to aid Yusaku. I think that's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. Speaking of which, going back to those creatures we saw in the beginning, from the couple that I was able to see, I've heard there's 6 from stuff online, I'm not sure. I would assume each of them probably ends up being associated with a bird. I would predict maybe each of them ends up serving as sort of like an Ignis within the dual discs of each of the respective characters that they're tied to. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure Blue Angel's color is obviously blue, so she would probably have the blue AI within her disc that, I know I've been calling them spirits, it's a little bit of weird terminology, but she would have the blue AI within her disc that helps her duel, maybe is connected to her ace monster in some way further down the line, sort of like the Signer Dragons yet again. So I'm curious to see what they do with that type of thing. So far, I mean, overall I think it was a great episode. Sorry if I'm spitballing a lot of stuff at you guys. I'm just trying to get a lot of thoughts out fairly quickly because I don't want any of these reviews to last too long, otherwise I'll just be rambling. So please feel free, and I encourage you to comment down below what your thoughts of the first episodes were. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, I always appreciate constructive criticism, whatever it may be, as long as you're not a jerk about it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you next time.